My name is Rachel Chen, and I'm 32 years old. Last Thursday, I sat in a mahogany-lined conference room, watching my entire world crumble as the family attorney read my parents' will. Everything, the house, the business, the investments, all of it went to my younger brother Kevin. After 20 years of being the responsible daughter, the one who sacrificed everything for this family, I inherited nothing but a handwritten note that would change everything I thought I knew about my life. Before I tell you what that note revealed and the decision that shocked everyone, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe, because this story about family loyalty and the ultimate betrayal will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Growing up in San Francisco's Richmond district, my family looked perfect from the outside. My parents, David and Susan Chen, owned Chen Electronics, a small but successful computer repair shop that had been serving the community for over 30 years. We lived in a modest Victorian house that my father had bought in the 1980s, before the neighborhood became expensive. To anyone looking in, we were the model immigrant success story. But inside our home, there were unspoken rules that shaped every aspect of our lives. As the older daughter, I was groomed from childhood to be responsible, reliable, and self-sufficient. My parents made it clear that great things were expected of me, but support would be minimal. "You're smart, Rachel," my mother would say whenever I asked for help. "Figure it out yourself. That's how you become strong." Kevin, 3 years younger, lived under completely different expectations. Where I was pushed toward independence, he was coddled and protected. When I brought home straight A's, my parents would nod approvingly and move on. When Kevin brought home C's, they would celebrate his effort and hire tutors to help him improve. When I wanted to join the debate team, I was told extracurriculars were a distraction from academics. When Kevin expressed interest in music, they immediately bought him a $1,000 guitar and paid for private lessons. The pattern was so consistent that I thought it was normal. I assumed all families operated this way. The older child bears responsibility, while the younger one receives nurturing. I never questioned why Kevin got a car for his 16th birthday, while I had to work part-time at a grocery store to save for mine. I never wondered why his college tuition was paid in full while I graduated with $40,000 in student loans. It was just how things worked in the Chen household. After college, I joined a tech startup in Silicon Valley. The hours were brutal, but the experience was invaluable. I threw myself into work, building expertise in software development and business strategy. Meanwhile, Kevin drifted through his early 20s, trying different career paths: photographer, personal trainer, aspiring musician, while living rent-free in our parents' house. When his ventures failed, my parents would comfort him, telling him he was just finding his passion. When I was 26, my father had his first heart attack. I immediately took leave from my job to help run the family business. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement stretched into months as my father recovered. I learned every aspect of Chen Electronics, from inventory management to customer relations to financial planning. I modernized their systems, expanded their online presence, and increased revenue by 40% in the first year. Kevin would occasionally help out at the store, but his contributions were sporadic at best. He would charm customers with his easy smile and natural charisma, but when it came to the detailed work of running a business, he was nowhere to be found. My parents seemed to accept this as normal. "Kevin has different strengths," my mother would say when I pointed out his absences during busy periods. During my father's recovery, I discovered the business was in worse financial shape than anyone realized. Years of poor bookkeeping and declining revenue had created serious cash flow problems. The building needed major repairs, equipment was outdated, and several large clients were behind on payments. I spent countless nights developing recovery plans, negotiating with creditors, and implementing cost-cutting measures that kept the business afloat. When my father returned to work 6 months later, he was amazed by the improvements. "Marcus, you saved us," he said, tears in his eyes. "I don't know what we would have done without you." For the first time in my life, I felt truly appreciated by my parents. I thought this was the moment our relationship would finally change. But within weeks, things returned to the old patterns. My father resumed control of daily operations, often overriding decisions I had made during his absence. When I suggested we should formalize my role with an official title and salary, he seemed uncomfortable. "Let's see how things develop," he said. "You have your own career to think about." The pattern was so consistent that I thought it was normal. I assumed all families operated this way. The older child bears responsibility, while the younger one receives nurturing. I never questioned why Kevin got a car for his 16th birthday while I had to work part-time at a local cafe to save for mine. I never wondered why his college tuition was paid in full while I graduated with $40,000 in student loans. It was just how things worked in the Chen household. After college, I joined a tech startup in Silicon Valley. The hours were brutal, but the experience was invaluable. I threw myself into work, building expertise in software development and business strategy. Meanwhile, Kevin drifted through his early 20s, trying different career paths: photographer, personal trainer, aspiring musician, while living rent-free in our parents' house. When his ventures failed, my parents would comfort him, telling him he was just finding his passion. When I was 26, my father had his first heart attack. I immediately took leave from my job to help run the family business. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement stretched into months as my father recovered. I learned every aspect of Chen Electronics, from inventory management to customer relations to financial planning. I modernized their systems, expanded their online presence, and increased revenue by 40% in the first year. Kevin would occasionally help out at the store, but his contributions were sporadic at best. He would charm customers with his easy smile and natural charisma, but when it came to the detailed work of running a business, he was nowhere to be found. My parents seemed to accept this as normal. Kevin has different strengths, my mother would say when I pointed out his absences during busy periods. During my father's recovery, I discovered the business was in worse financial shape than anyone realized. Years of poor bookkeeping and declining revenue had created serious cash flow problems. The building needed major repairs, equipment was outdated, and several large clients were behind on payments. I spent countless nights developing recovery plans, negotiating with creditors, and implementing cost-cutting measures that kept the business afloat. When my father returned to work 6 months later, he was amazed by the improvements. "Rachel, you saved us," he said, tears in his eyes. "I don't know what we would have done without you." For the first time in my life, I felt truly appreciated by my parents. I thought this was the moment our relationship would finally change. But within weeks, things returned to the old patterns. My father resumed control of daily operations, often overriding decisions I had made during his absence. When I suggested we should formalize my role with an official title and salary, he seemed uncomfortable. "Let's see how things develop," he said. "You have your own career to think about." That's when I made what I now realize was a crucial mistake. Instead of returning to my tech job, I decided to stay and help grow the family business. I believed that my dedication would eventually be recognized, that my parents would see how much the business meant to me, and how much I had contributed to its success. I turned down multiple high-paying job offers to remain at Chen Electronics, working for a fraction of what I could have earned elsewhere. Over the next 5 years, I transformed the business completely. I negotiated contracts with major tech companies for repair services, established partnerships with local schools and nonprofits, and created an e-commerce platform that expanded our customer base beyond the neighborhood. Revenue tripled during this period, and we became one of the most respected electronics repair shops in the city. Kevin, meanwhile, continued his pattern of starting projects and abandoning them. After music failed to provide steady income, he tried his hand at photography, then personal training, then attempted to start a food truck business that folded within 3 months. Each failure was met with sympathy and encouragement from our parents, along with financial support to help him get back on his feet. What hurt most was watching my parents celebrate Kevin's minimal involvement in the business while taking my contributions for granted. When he would show up for a few hours and help a customer, they would praise him for weeks. When I worked 16-hour days to complete a major corporate contract, it was simply expected. The message was clear: I was capable and therefore required no recognition, while Kevin needed constant validation to function. During this time, I also became the family's financial safety net. When Kevin's food truck venture failed, leaving him with $15,000 in debt, I loaned him the money to pay it off. When our parents needed help with home repairs after a particularly bad storm, I covered the costs. When Kevin's car broke down and he needed transportation for job interviews, I bought him a reliable used vehicle. Each time, I told myself this was what families do for each other. But the support only flowed in one direction. When I needed help moving to a new apartment, Kevin was conveniently busy with a photography gig. When I was hospitalized for 3 days with pneumonia, my parents visited once while Kevin never showed up at all. When I asked my family to attend the annual Tech Industry Award ceremony where I was being honored for innovation in small business technology, they all had conflicts that prevented them from coming. The breaking point should have come 2 years ago when my mother was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. I immediately rearranged my entire life to coordinate her treatment, driving her to chemotherapy appointments, managing her medications, and handling all communication with doctors. I set up a home office in their house so I could work while caring for her. Kevin visited occasionally, bringing flowers and taking selfies with Mom that he posted on social media with captions about being grateful for family. During one particularly difficult week of treatment, my mother looked at me with gratitude and said, "Rachel, you're such a blessing. I don't know what we'd do without you. You're going to make such a wonderful mother someday." Then, in the same conversation, she mentioned how proud she was of Kevin for being so supportive during this difficult time because he had started sending her daily text messages. The disparity was so obvious it was almost absurd, yet I continued to tell myself this was normal family dynamics. Some children are caregivers by nature, others show love differently. I made excuses for my family the same way they made excuses for Kevin. After my mother's successful treatment and recovery, life returned to its usual rhythm. I managed the day-to-day operations of Chen Electronics while my parents enjoyed a more relaxed semi-retirement. Kevin bounced between various projects, most recently attempting to become a social media influencer, focused on lifestyle and wellness. His Instagram account had a modest following, but it generated little income. 3 months ago, my parents called a family meeting. They were getting older, they said, and wanted to start thinking about the future of the business and their estate. They had scheduled appointments with their attorney and financial planner to update their wills and discuss succession planning. I felt a surge of excitement mixed with anxiety. Finally, we would have official conversations about my role in the family business and my future with the company I had helped build. "We want to make sure everything is handled properly," my father said. "The business needs to continue thriving, and we want both of our children to be taken care of." I nodded eagerly. Kevin looked uncomfortable with the formal discussion, shifting in his chair and checking his phone repeatedly. Financial planning had never been his strong suit, and legal discussions made him anxious. "We'll meet with Mr. Harrison next week," my mother added, referring to their longtime attorney. "He'll help us structure everything fairly." The word fairly gave me hope. Surely, after all these years of building the business, after all the sacrifice and dedication I had shown, fairness would mean recognizing my contributions. I wasn't expecting everything. Kevin was their son too, but I hoped for official recognition of my role and some security for my future. Over the following weeks, my parents had several meetings with their attorney and financial advisor, but they kept the details private. "Legal stuff is boring," my father would say when I asked about the discussions. "We'll let you know when everything is finalized." I respected their privacy while continuing to run the business as I had for years. I developed new client relationships, managed our expanding online presence, and coordinated the installation of updated equipment that would keep us competitive. I even started exploring opportunities to open a second location, excited about the possibility of expanding the family business. Then, 2 weeks ago, everything changed with a phone call I'll never forget. I was at the shop, troubleshooting a complex network issue for one of our corporate clients, when my mother called around 3 p.m. Her voice sounded strange, distant and formal in a way I'd never heard before. "Rachel, your father and I need to see you at home this evening. We have something important to discuss." "Is everything okay?" I asked immediately, my mind jumping to health concerns. "Everything's fine," she said quickly. "We just need to talk about some decisions we've made." That evening, I arrived at my parents' house to find Kevin's car already in the driveway. Inside, the atmosphere felt tense. My parents sat on their usual spots on the living room couch, while Kevin occupied the recliner. I took the remaining chair, noting how formal everyone seemed. "We've finalized our estate planning," my father began without preamble. "We wanted to explain our decisions to both of you before the documents are officially recorded." My heart started beating faster. This was it, the moment I'd been hoping for, when my contributions would finally be officially recognized. "We've decided to leave the house and the business to Kevin," my mother continued. "We believe this arrangement will work best for everyone involved." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at them, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say. "The business will go to Kevin," my father repeated, "along with the house and our investment accounts. We've thought about this carefully, and we believe Kevin needs the stability more than you do." I looked at Kevin, who was studiously avoiding eye contact, staring at his hands folded in his lap. "But I've been running the business for 6 years," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've built most of our current client base. I've modernized everything. I've tripled the revenue. And we're grateful for all your hard work," my mother said. "But you're successful in your own right. You could start your own business tomorrow if you wanted to. Kevin needs this foundation to build his life on." The conversation continued for another hour, but I remember little of it. My parents had made their decision, and no amount of logical argument would change their minds. They saw my competence as a reason to give me less, while Kevin's struggles were a reason to give him more. I left their house that night in a daze, driving aimlessly through the city streets. Everything I had believed about my place in the family, about the value of my contributions, about the future I was building, all of it was gone in a single conversation. But the real shock was still to come. Last Thursday, I received a call from Robert Harrison, my parents' attorney, asking me to come to his office. "There are some documents you need to receive," he said. "Part of your parents' estate planning process." I assumed this would be a formality. Perhaps some paperwork acknowledging my years of service to the business, or information about a small inheritance they hadn't mentioned during our family meeting. I was wrong. Mr. Harrison's office was exactly what you'd expect from a family attorney who'd been practicing for 40 years, leather-bound books, heavy wooden furniture, and the smell of old documents. He greeted me with professional sympathy, which should have been my first warning. "Please have a seat, Rachel," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his mahogany desk. "I have some documents to share with you, as well as something your parents specifically asked me to give you." He slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside were copies of my parents' will, their trust documents, and various financial statements. Everything confirmed what they had told me. Kevin would inherit the house, the business, and all their assets. My name appeared nowhere in the will except in a brief paragraph stating that I had been intentionally omitted due to my independent nature and successful career. But then Mr. Harrison reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in my mother's handwriting. "Your mother asked me to give this to you after reviewing the will," he said gently. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of my mother's personal stationery with a handwritten note that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. The note read, "My dearest Rachel, if you are reading this, then you now know about our decision regarding the will. I know this must be confusing and hurtful, and I wish I could explain everything in person, but some truths are too difficult to speak aloud. Kevin is not your biological brother. When your father and I were struggling to conceive a second child, we made the decision to adopt through a private arrangement. We never told either of you because we wanted Kevin to feel like a true member of our family from the beginning. But more than that, Rachel, you are not your father's biological daughter. 28 years ago, I had an affair with someone I'd known since high school. When I became pregnant, I ended the relationship immediately and told your father the baby was his. He never questioned it, and you were born into what he believed was his complete family. I have carried this secret for your entire life, and it has shaped every decision I've made as a mother. I gave Kevin everything because I knew he was ours by choice, and I could never give you what you deserved because I was afraid of what might happen if the truth came out. Your real father is Dr. James Wu. He owns the medical practice on Irving Street. You may have seen his name around the neighborhood. He never knew about you, and I don't believe he should be told now. But I wanted you to understand why things have always been different for you and our family. You were never the problem, Rachel. You were never lacking in any way. I was just a coward who couldn't face the truth of what I'd done, and I let that fear hurt you for your entire life. I hope someday you can forgive me. Love, always. Mom. I read the note 3 times before the words fully registered. Mr. Harrison sat quietly, giving me time to process. When I finally looked up, he had a glass of water ready. "Did you know about this?" I asked him. He shook his head. "Your mother gave me that envelope 6 months ago with instructions to give it to you only after the will reading. She didn't explain the contents." Everything suddenly made sense. The different treatment, the lack of recognition, the way I'd always felt like an outsider in my own family. It wasn't about my personality or my capabilities. It was about guilt and secrets and a mother who couldn't look at me without being reminded of her betrayal. I spent the next hour in Mr. Harrison's office, asking questions about the legal implications of what I'd learned. As an adult who had been raised as David Chen's daughter, I had no legal claim to his estate regardless of biology. The will was valid, and Kevin would inherit everything as planned. But the note had given me something more valuable than money or property. It had given me understanding. For the first time in my life, the puzzle pieces of my childhood made sense. I drove home slowly, my mind racing with questions and realizations. Should I confront my parents about the note? Should I seek out my biological father? Should I tell Kevin the truth about both of our origins? By the time I reached my apartment, I had made a decision that surprised even me. I called my employer, the tech company where I'd worked briefly before joining the family business, and asked if the senior management position they'd offered me 2 years ago was still available. It wasn't, but they had something even better. They were launching a new division focused on small business technology solutions, and they needed someone with both technical expertise and real-world experience running a small business. The salary was more than double what I'd ever made, and the position came with equity in the company. I accepted immediately. The next day, I went to Chin Electronics for what I knew would be the last time as an employee. I spent the morning documenting everything: client relationships, system passwords, vendor contacts, ongoing projects. I created detailed instructions for whoever would take over my responsibilities. When my parents arrived around noon, they found everything neatly organized on the desk, along with my resignation letter. "What's this?" my father asked, picking up the letter. "My resignation," I said calmly. "My last day is today." My mother's face went pale. "Rachel, you can't just leave. The business needs you." "The business belongs to Kevin now," I replied. "It's time for him to learn how to run it." "But he's not ready," my father protested. "He doesn't understand the systems you've put in place." "Then he'll learn. The same way I had to learn everything else in my life." I handed my father a folder containing my documentation. "Everything he needs to know is written down. The rest he'll figure out through experience." "This is childish," my mother said, her voice sharp with anger. "You're abandoning your family over money." "This isn't about money," I said, meeting her eyes. "This is about respect. This is about recognition. This is about building a life where my contributions matter." I started toward the door, then turned back. "And Mom, thank you for the note." It explained everything. The look of shock and fear that crossed her face told me she understood exactly what I meant. Over the next 2 weeks, I received countless calls and messages from my family. My father called daily, alternating between anger and pleading, asking me to come back to save the business. My mother's messages were shorter and more desperate, clearly worried about what else I might have learned from her letter. Kevin, surprisingly, was the only one who didn't try to convince me to return. When he finally called, 3 weeks after I'd left, his voice was different, more mature somehow. "Rachel, I know things are messed up right now, but I want you to know I never asked for any of this. I didn't know about the will until that night when they told us both." "I know," I said. "This isn't your fault, Kevin. The business is struggling without you," he continued. "I'm trying to learn everything, but it's overwhelming. Dad keeps getting frustrated with me, and Mom seems stressed all the time." "You'll figure it out," I told him. "You're smarter than you think." "What if I'm not, though? What if I ruin everything you built?" For the first time in our relationship, Kevin was asking for my help without expecting it to be freely given. "Do you want my advice?" I asked. "Yes." "Hire a business manager. Someone with experience in small business operations. Use them to handle the day-to-day management while you learn the industry. It'll cost money, but it's better than losing customers because you're not ready yet." "Would you consider coming back as a consultant?" he asked hopefully. "No, Kevin. I'm building my own life now. But I'll answer questions if you call." 6 months have passed since I left Chin Electronics, and my life has transformed completely. My new job challenges me in ways I never expected, and I'm working on projects that could impact thousands of small businesses across the country. I've been promoted twice and recently received stock options that could be worth substantial money if the company goes public as planned. I moved into a beautiful apartment in Soma with panoramic views of the city. For the first time in my adult life, I'm living entirely for myself, making decisions based on my own goals and desires rather than family obligations. I haven't contacted Dr. James Wu, my biological father. The knowledge of his identity was enough for now. Someday I might want to know more about my medical history or family background, but I'm not ready for that conversation yet. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something distant but civil. They've stopped calling me to come back to the business, accepting that their decision had consequences they hadn't anticipated. My mother never mentioned the note again, but I can see the guilt in her eyes when we interact at family gatherings. Kevin has surprised everyone, including himself, by rising to the challenge of running Chin Electronics. He hired a business manager as I'd suggested, and together they've maintained most of the client relationships I'd built. Revenue has declined somewhat, but the business remains profitable. More importantly, Kevin has developed genuine pride in the company, working harder than he ever had in his life. 3 months ago, he called with unexpected news. "I want to give you half the business," he said without preamble. "What?" I responded, genuinely shocked. "It's not right that you got nothing. You built this company into what it is today. I've learned enough now to understand what you did here, and it's not fair that I inherited everything just because Mom and Dad felt sorry for me." "Kevin, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. I've talked to a lawyer about transferring ownership. We could be partners, you could stay in your new job, and I'll handle the daily operations. We'll split the profits." I was quiet for a long moment, touched by his offer, but certain of my answer. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but no. The business is yours now. You've earned it by stepping up when it mattered. Don't give me half out of guilt." "But it's not fair," he insisted. "Life isn't always fair, Kevin. But that doesn't mean we have to keep repeating the same patterns. You keep the business, make it successful, and maybe someday when you have children of your own, remember this conversation and do better than our parents did." Last month, I ran into my mother at the grocery store. We talked briefly about safe topics, the weather, her garden, my new apartment. As we were parting ways, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "You look happy, Rachel. Really happy." "I am," I said honestly. "I'm sorry it took losing you for me to realize what we had," she said quietly. It wasn't a complete apology or acknowledgement of everything that had happened, but it was more honesty than she'd shown in my entire life. "I'm not lost, Mom. I'm just living my own life now." As I walked to my car, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain of that day in the lawyer's office had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. Learning the truth about my parentage had explained so much about my childhood, but more importantly, it had freed me from the endless quest for approval that had defined my life. The family I'd been born into had never been able to see my worth, but that didn't diminish my value. The business I'd helped build would continue without me, and that was okay. The relationships I'd thought were unbreakable had broken, but in their place, I'd built something stronger. A relationship with myself based on respect and recognition of my own worth. Sometimes the most painful discoveries lead to the most important revelations. That day at the lawyer's office, I learned that I'd been excluded from my family's legacy. But in the months that followed, I discovered something far more valuable. I didn't need their validation to build a meaningful life. The note my mother left me was meant to explain why I'd been treated differently, but it actually revealed why I was free. I wasn't bound by the expectations and limitations they'd placed on me. I wasn't obligated to accept less than I deserved because of their guilt or fear. I was free to create my own legacy, to build relationships based on mutual respect, and to value myself appropriately regardless of how others chose to see me. That lawyer's office was where one chapter of my life ended, but it was also where another began, one where I finally understood that the only approval I needed was my own. If you've ever felt unvalued or unrecognized by the people who should appreciate you most, remember this: your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Sometimes the most important inheritance you can receive is the knowledge that you're strong enough to build your own legacy. Have you ever discovered something about your family that completely changed how you saw your childhood? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the most difficult moments. Remember, sometimes the best thing that can happen is losing what you thought you wanted, so you can find what you actually need.